The views and opinions expressed on this platform are of me, myself, and I, not any agency I'm affiliated with. So please do not take what I say personally. Today, I have the honor, the privilege, if you will, of having paramedic extraordinaire, lifesaver firefighter Adam Fields with us today. Adam, if you want to give a little introduction about yourself, go ahead, boost your ego.
I will. That was the fourth best introduction I've ever had. But my name is Adam Fields. I am a paramedic in the great state of Texas. I'm now entering my 2020, my 12th year being in fire and EMS. A little bit of how I got started. It was really a family tradition. I've spent the greater part of my life trying to one-up my grandfather. And considering as how I'm still alive, I think I'm in the lead. So, yeah, I'm basically following a family tradition. So that's how I've sort of landed where I'm at, working for an excellent fire department in one of the suburbs of Houston. Got a decent call volume. We run about 9,000 a year, so it's not bad, not bad.
So, about how many naps do you get per shift?
Give or take about 16 or 17. Depends on the day.
All right, so I am not in the firefighter field. I did join an academy for a day, and I've since dropped.
It's like a make-a-wish. It's like, I just want to come out and try it.
I got to put on the hat, and that was good enough. No, so
It's all you need, really. It's just the hat.
so I don't know much about the firefighter side other than like when we do a standby in case if they're on a structure fire or something like that, or when they come on scene with us. And there are some good fire crews out there.
Right.
I'm just gonna leave it at that because just like in EMS, there's some good EMT paramedics.
You got your bad apples out there, for sure.
For sure. So tell me the reality of being like, a hero firefighter. Besides, you get to drive around in the fire truck in parades, you pick Meemaw up off on the floor, you post in your calendars, you read for children. Go ahead, tell me about the reality of it.
Okay, well, first, it's a bold assumption thinking that I can read. Secondly, a big part of it is dealing with the absolute disappointment when people think they call the fire department, they're going to get that truck full of nice calendar guys that hop out, and then they see me and my mustache. And it's sort of a disappointment for them. So mitigating disappointment is towards the top of the list for what we do. Other than that, it's 99% medical calls. That's the reality of it. Every once in a while, you'll get toned for that structure fire, and you show up and it's somebody that left something in their oven and it has smoked out their kitchen. It's just a reality of it. Every once in a while, though, the fire gods will bless you with something cool.
Because I feel like a lot of people join fire and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to go save like animals out of houses, pick people up off the floor out of these houses that are burning alive. We're going to put on the full gear. But it is, like you said, it is 99% medical. And I feel like that might be a huge disappointment.
Yes. So, part you'll have to edit out, but I'm just going to tell you. The only animal that I have saved from a house was a cat that was extremely deceased. I found him in the bathroom next to the toilet. I guess he was trying to get into the water where it was cool. But, poor little cat found out that, well, guess what? That water's boiling too. And, yeah. So the family wanted us to go in and get him. So I go in there, and I put him in a box, like a cardboard box. And I didn't realize at the time that when I had set the box down to pick the cat up, to put the cat in the box, I walk through the house and then back out the front door, And as I'm walking down the steps, like the jostling from the steps, the cat falls out of the bottom of the box onto the ground. Because when I set down the box to pick him up, the bottom of the box got wet. And he fell through the box.
Oh God.
It was
Were there
so bad.
children watching?
There were no children watching, but it was so bad. Just the look of horror on the other guys that were standing outside's faces. I've got this like mutilated cat that fell out of a box. Just, oh my lord, it was horrible.
So it's not always what do you guys call it? Job town?
No, it is not always job down. Not even a little bit. In fact, since I've been at this department, we've made two actual house fires. So, yeah. Few and far between, but they do happen. Especially when TikTok gets involved.
Oof. Do you want to talk about that one?
I don't think I can yet, because it's being investigated. But eventually, sure.
Okay. We'll if I have you back on, we'll venture into that
We'll
one.
revisit.
Okay, so did you know going into fire that it was like 99% medical, or like why, like what was the reason you switched from working on the box into going into donning the gear, being a true hero that everyone needs, having the epic mustache? I will say it's a good mustache. Looks very nice.
Thank you. Thank you. I did know going into it what the job entails. Because my grandpa was the fire chief when I was really, really little. So I grew up in and around the fire service. So there were no surprises up until I actually got with the department, started putting on the gear. It was like a little hotter than I would like, but yeah, it be like that sometimes.
Was it okay? So, and EMS, we go in, we have these calls, we go in people's houses, we pick them up, we do whatever, we treat them, transport, drop them off, and that's it. You guys have like a different, kind of the same, but also not. But like when the fire department gets there on these medical calls, which is pretty much all y'all do, but when y'all get there, either y'all make first patient contact or like you guys show up after us and help us with whatever, and then you guys get to clear up and roll out. Was it hard transitioning and not prolonging like the patient care and stuff, or
Not at all. Not even a little bit. Because those calls, they come in at 3 in the morning and you show up and you're like, why did you call an ambulance? Because then we can be like, oh, hello, paramedics. Here you go. And then we're out. We don't have to deal with it for 2.5 hours. So, it's, I mean, it is what it is.
okay, let me ask this. So, one of our fire departments where I work at, even though, and I'll just say this very nicely, even though they're paid by the taxpayers and it's tax dollars for them to show up, they will cancel themselves on the Alpha and Bravo non-priority calls, which is great because 9 times out of 10, that's really when we need them. So then we have to call them back. Are you guys that way, or is that just like unique?
And I think that is a them thing because a lot of the times, in both departments that I'm at, they're both ESDs. Um, and a lot of the times, the ambulance will be coming from 20, 30 minutes away, which is an entirely different thing that we'll get into. But um, we do not. I'm trying to think of how to explain this. We're dispatched by the county. So we don't get Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo calls. We just get this is what the call is, take off at one department. At the other department, we have, Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo. And anything that is a Delta and Echo call, you're going to get either an engine or a tower. You're going to get the ambulance and you're going to get the EMS squad, which is the EMS captain on shift. So at that department, the only people that can cancel anything are the paramedics when we get on scene. So we get on scene, we find out that echo call that is a full arrest turns out to be my, great stepmother had a bad taste in her mouth for the past 3 days. um, and wants to talk about it, then we can get on there and say, medic, insert medic number, cancel everybody, we got it. So neither department can you cancel an engine before an ambulance gets there. So if we get toned, we're going, regardless.
Which is fair. Dude, it's hard whenever like we'll get those calls and it's like we're reading the notes, we're like, okay, they either like they weigh a lot and we need help like lifting them up, or this doesn't really sound like a low priority call, or hey, this could turn one way or another. And it's just hard when they cancel themselves because it's like, well, good thing we didn't need y'all. I mean, I understand after so many times of like we'll cancel them on scene, like, okay, yeah, that probably gets old. But at the same time, as with every call, you never know.
Exactly, and that's another thing. How often have you gotten those call notes that tells you, "Hey, this is what you're going to," and you walk in and it has nothing to do with the CAD notes that you just read? And you're like, "Oh, well, okay, that's fantastic. Let's change our game plan entirely."
Let's go grab all the equipment out the truck because the call notes, which after a while, dude, sometimes I'll glance over them on the way to the call, but most of the times I'm like, I'm not even gonna read it. It's not gonna be the same when we get on scene. But then sometimes it's like, oh, it's a seizure, but it's an alpha, and you're reading it's like recently it's a 4-year old having a seizure who has no history of seizures. So I'm like, no, so I'll go over the radio and be like, we're gonna upgrade this based on the CAD notes. And are we supposed to? I don't know, but like, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to get silly with this kind of call.
Yeah, like what are they gonna do? I mean, come on. That's another thing. Anytime we get a call for a fall, it usually comes in as a non-emergent immediate response. I'm not gonna leave Mima laying on the floor, especially it'd say she's already been there for 6 hours and was finally able to get a hold of it. I'm not gonna leave her laying on the floor for another 15 minutes while we're, just bebopping along on our way to her house. I'm going to run that emergent every single time. So,
I'm here for that. Yeah. So, okay, you guys do 48s, right?
yes, we do. Work a 48.96.
How do you balance having like an actual life outside of fire versus like you do your 48s? Are you off for the rest? Do you pick up overtime? Like, what's your setup?
So, I am actually an instructor. Right now, we're doing an EMT class. So if it's a class night, like a Monday or Wednesday, and we're at work, then we'll just go in service on there, and we'll go to our admin building where the class is, and write it out there. If we get a call, we get a call. We go run it. If we transport to the hospital, we'll go do that. If class is still going on, we'll come back. Um, but if not, there's another instructor there to continue it. But other than that, usually we don't really get mandatoried that often. But if there's a need, if there's a spot that needs filled, then they'll put out. We use Chief Backstage as our department app, so they can get on there and send out a message to everybody. We get a little notification. If you want it, pick it up. If not, it's cool. So I'm blessed to have landed at a really good place that cares about us and understands that a work-life balance is important.
You say that which with
Such conviction, I know, because I truly believe it in my heart of hearts that that is the way it should be.
which is fair.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What would you say is your favorite type of call? Would you rather a fire, a medical, a trauma, respiratory, cardiac arrest? There's so psych. There are so many types of calls.
Oh yeah. Let me tell you about how psych calls are just my absolute favorite kind of calls. But um, I don't know. My heart is truly in the medical side of things. Um, Out of all of the call types that you just listed, traumas, they're fun, they're great, but they're most of the time so straightforward. You can see what's going on, and you're like, that is not supposed to be sticking out. So let's address that. But personally, I like those vague, the chest pains or the abdominal pains, something that you got to work for a little bit. Use your brain, try to figure out what's going on. Those are my favorites.
I hate abdominal calls. I hate them, hate them, hate them, hate them.
And so did I. because every time, and you notice I said so did I, not so do I, because up until 2 years ago, let me tell you, every time we would run an abdominal pain call, I would get there and they're like, "Oh, my stomach is killing me. Oh my lord." I'm like, "Bro, like, come on. It's not that serious." Um, until one day, I was minding my own business, just living my best life, and I started having some abdominal pains that were very unusual. You know, it wasn't like I was nauseated. It was like, oh dear God, what is happening to me? Like I was doubled over. I physically could not stand up. Ended up going to the ER. They did a CAT scan, and I had an abscess in a loop of my small bowel, which is a problem. So they admitted me, got IV antibiotics, got booted out. Everything was fine. Didn't need surgery, anything like that. So I go back out, back to, attempting to live my best life with mild PTSD from this abdominal pain. Like every time I would have to burp, I'm like, oh God, it's back. And then one day, sure as grandma's got gout, it showed up again. Same abdominal pain. I'm like, okay, well, now I already know what we need to do. Go to the ER, got a CAT scan. Bam, another abscess. Another hospital stay, IV antibiotics. And that second round, I finally got a GI doc to schedule an appointment with me so we can come in and find out why this atrocity has befallen me. So I go in. He's like, well, we need to schedule a colonoscopy. And I said, Doc, I'm only 28. I'm not ready to go down that road yet. Um, so I went and had a colonoscopy. And I got there. And based on the symptoms that I was having, I've weighed 226 pounds since high school. No more, no less. I don't know how, but it worked out that way. During the course of my second hospital stay to finally having my appointment with my GI doc, I had dropped down to 187 pounds. I didn't do anything different. I didn't eat any different. So, of course, my brain went to, I've got some kind of cancer. That's what this is. And, the symptoms I was having, my GI doctor was also concerned with that, which certainly did not help put my mind at ease. So, come time to examine Adam's nether regions, I told him, I want to go into this. I don't want any anesthesia. Like, I want to be able to talk to you in real time as it's happening, so I don't have to rely on, like, third-party information after the fact if you find something. So, he's like, yeah, that's fine, because I'd researched the no anesthesia, doing, like, colonoscopies and flexible sigmoidoscopies and things like that, and they say it wasn't bad. So, off we go. I get wheeled into the little operating room where they do their thing. He whips out a pediatric colonoscope, which was still substantially bigger than what I was willing to take on. But it was okay. It was fine. So he's getting ready to start the procedure. The lights were dimmed so he could see the screen. He had his music playing in the background. It was really romantic. I was still unprepared because he walked up to me behind the table. I was left lateral recumbent, just chilling, trying to go to a happy place. And there was no 1, 2, 3 go. There was not, hey, I'm about to do this. He did a digital exam before we started. That was hands down, no pun intended, but far and above the worst part of that entire experience. He did his little thing. It lasted 5 or 6 seconds, which is like 4 seconds longer than I feel it should have taken. And he said, well, your prostate's good. And I'm like, thank you, but I don't think that's what we're after. So, and then the procedure started. And it was nothing. Like, there was no pain. And other than the fact that you're being propped open mildly uncomfortably, you adapt to it after a little bit. It's about a 15-20 minute procedure. So he goes up, doesn't find anything in my colon from the back door all the way to the cecum. He made cecal intubation. There was nothing there. He said, well, since you're tolerating this, okay, I want to check out your terminal ileum while I'm in here because that could be part of the problem. So he backs up a little bit and takes that little left turn to go up into the ileum. And he started going, ah, mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, stop making these sounds and tell me what's going on. He said, there it is. And as soon as he said, there it is, I'm like, well, rest in peace, me, because he found it. And he goes, that is textbook Crohn's disease. And I was like, oh, thank God. I've never been so happy to have a lifelong disease in my entire life. Because, I mean, if you have to pick a chronic illness, Crohn's isn't a terrible one to go with. You
It's
know?
not.
Since I've started treatment for it, I get Entyvio every 8 weeks. It's an infusion. I've had zero problems. I'm back to being fat and happy. And, no more ER trips.
And it's not cancer.
It is not. It is not cancer. I don't know.
So after that technical difficulty, because technology hates me, I was just asking Adam how we're relating the abdominal pain and my dislike of them to the story of his colonoscopy.
So, the story of my colonoscopy correlates with your disdain of abdominal pain. Um, because I've lived it. I've lived abdominal pain, and now I truly understand and appreciate how bad it can be. So when I get those abdominal pain calls, I tend to treat them a little more aggressively than I used to, because I would want the same for me. And I hate that it had to come to that for me to bump up my treatment modalities, but it's come full circle. So now if you call 911 with abdominal pain and I show up at your house, I'm going to make that abdominal pain an unpleasant but distant memory for you. So that's how it is.
So let me ask this. If I'm in the area that you work in Houston, Texas, and I call for abdominal pain, am I getting pain medication?
Most likely.
Okay.
Still do a solid assessment, find out why you're having abdominal pain, and then we'll go from there, buddy. But if it adds up and you truly are hurting, then I will do what I can to alleviate your pain and suffering, just like that TV show Emergency taught me to when they made it in 1976 or whenever it was.
Okay, I was wondering because, like, I feel like some people are so, like, don't give pain medication to abdominal pain because blah, 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 blah. But, like I heard on a podcast that I listened to, like, if you give pain medication, if they're actually hurting, like you're saying, it's not going to deter the doctor from not doing any of their further treatments and, like, the scans and, like, all the like, all that stuff. So it's not going to cloud that. But, and then another thing is that it's not like you're going to walk in and be like, yeah, I gave, I don't know, 50 of fentanyl, something like that, whatever your drug of choice is. And people are going to look at you and be like, oh, well, they were faking it the whole time. Nah, you've been duped. And yeah.
My least favorite excuse I've heard for withholding pain medication is, I don't want to give you this pain medicine so you can tell the doctor what you're feeling. Bro, like you're not going to remember why you called 911 10 minutes ago? I mean, come on.
Yeah. No, I mean, sometimes I'm not gonna lie, if it feels like it's a shady whatever, I'll give like some Benadryl because it has the antiemetic effects. It has, like the gets you a little drowsy. You don't really feel the pain as much, but I'm not against giving pain medication to abdominal pain. I don't know. That's just me. That's just provider choice, but I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not treating your patients, what are you doing?
Ugh, you are very correct.
Always.
Sometimes. But it's okay. It's okay.
We all have our faults. Mine is, that I'm always right. So, just kidding. I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding.
You're starting to sound like me a little bit.
Oh, God help me. So,
Next thing you know, you'll have your very own mustache.
I already do. I'm just hiding it well.
That's why you keep your face behind the mic. That all makes sense now. I was wondering what you were doing. You're concealing.
Keeps the mystery alive.
Exactly.
Next one. What is the craziest or funniest call you've ever had?
Oh my god. Okay. Um, Craziest. I've gone my entire career without ever delivering a baby, ever, in the field, until my second day as a paramedic. Second day. Like my 14th hour of being a real paramedic.
A real one.
Yeah, yeah. It's because you're doing your clinicals and everything. You a little baby. You're like an EMT Basic Plus when you're in clinicals. So my second day as a paramedic, I was still in the phase where every time the little thing would go incident assigned, nothing but sheer terror would come over me. Like my partner would look over and I'm trembling in the window and she's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "I've got a cold or something," just trying to play it off.
I still do that.
Exactly. It happens. But we get a call, and it comes in as pregnancy problems, and those are always coded as like pregnancy problems slash miscarriage slash whatever. Um, and I would later find out this lady was having the complete polar opposite of a miscarriage. So we take off, and it says patient. It was like 41 weeks, so it's time. Like she's there and it said patient feels like she's having contractions, and I'm like, okay, cool, I can fade that, no problem. So we take off, and then as we got closer, the call notes kept getting worse. It went from contractions 7 minutes apart. I'm like, oh yeah, we got time. What dispatch had failed to tell us was this was her fourth child.
Oh, God.
Yeah, oh yeah, her fourth living child. She's P4G, PG13, whatever the paragravida. I don't even know, but she was that, but with the number four. Okay, she was PGOL whatever 4. All of them were 4s. So, well, technically, I guess at the time one of them was still a 3, but it rapidly became 4 because I got to experience what they told us in paramedic school was a precipitous delivery. So as we're getting closer, the call notes are getting worse. As we're turning into the neighborhood, a call note comes through. The little thing said, "Your incident has been updated." And I'm like, "Thank you for the information." So I look, and it says, "Patient is attempting to leave POV." And I said, "Slow down, they might beat us." I'm just kidding. We didn't. So we keep going. And as we're turning onto this woman's road, it updated again and said the baby is crowning. I'm like, this woman went from her contractions being 7 minutes apart to the baby crowning in like 3 minutes. What happened? So we pull up. We had an engine coming with us, but they were still probably 40 or 50 seconds behind us. So I get out. I told my partner, grab the OB kit. Don't worry about the stretcher. Come on. Grab it and let's go. So I go, and they're sitting on the bed, that tailgate open, of a little tiny F-150 in the parking lot of an apartment complex. This lady is laid back. There was no screaming. She wasn't freaking out. I said, "Hey, I'm Adam. I'm going to be your Oh, my God. Because the baby was, about neck deep inside of his mother. He was trying to get out of there very quickly. So I had my little gloves on, and I'm like, "Okay, Adam, ABCs. Remember your ABCs." So I looked at Mom. I said, "Is your airway open?" And it was... I'm turning, looking for my partner. I'm screaming, "BSI, scene safe." It was so bad. So I'm sitting here doing my best to talk her through this delivery. I said, "Okay, when you feel like you have to push," and then she just let it rip. And the baby's shoulder dipped out, so I grabbed his head, and I, assisted with his shoulder coming out. His head was already out. It wasn't, shoulder dystocia or anything like that. So he's coming out, pull the shoulder down, pull the other shoulder up, and then shoo, out comes baby. And he was blue. He was not crying. He wasn't screaming. And I'm like, so that's how this is going to go, right? So, clamp the cord. I'm holding the baby. And I'm like, I need to stimulate him. I need to irritate him and make him cry. And I'm glad I caught myself because I was like, okay, just don't shake him. Because, wake up. But Finally, he let out a little cry, and then he coughed, and then he came alive. Started crying, started screaming, handed him to mom, and I said, "Can we please go now? Like, let's go." So we take mom, take baby, we get in the ambulance. I told my partner, I don't care where we go, find a hospital that's close, and let's go there. So as we're going, the mom says, "Well, that's strange." And I said, "No, please, there's no strangeness. Like, what is strange?" She goes, "I feel like I need to push again." And my brain immediately goes to, "Oh my god, it's twins. How sweet." Um, but come to find out, the child's twin was the placenta, which, if you've never handled one, is disgusting. I'm sorry to any mothers out there, but come on. Why is that? Why does that have to be a thing? Like, it is so bad. It's like a heavy, soggy jellyfish that I had to pick up and put in a bio bag. But, you know, baby was healthy. Mom was only mildly inconvenienced by the fact that she just delivered an entire child in the bed of an F 150. It was a good time. So that was definitely probably my craziest call because I ended up having to do 2 tickets on that one. So that was a little not fun.
Do you bill twice for that, or?
Well, the baby was self pay, so probably. It's private EMS.
Yeah. No, that's, dude, not to get any feedback from HR or supervisors, but I can't promise that on Rex. I don't transport one on the stretcher and say that's my patient and have somebody else just ride with, because that second report really sucks.
You're right. Or you roll up on a wreck and it's like, a family of 17 in a minivan that was on their way to Luby's to get dinner. They got, it just, like, there was a girl at a red light behind them that was playing on TikTok and her foot slipped off the brake and they impacted them at 3/4 of a mile an hour. So you get there and you're like, there's not even any damage to these vehicles, but you've made quote unquote patient contact. There was only one person in that van. I don't know what happened. So I'm clear with a refusal. It was a hit and run. The other party's gone. And I don't really do this, by the way. If anybody's listening, I do all of the proper documentation, Chief. I promise.
Chief, if you're there, this is an honor. Thank you for being included. Thank you for being a part.
It's like I will turn in my 2 weeks effective immediately.
Okay. What is a piece of advice you'd give to someone either going into fire or EMS or both, whatever, or somebody already in it? Do you have any advice to pass along?
I do. Don't come into it with unrealistic expectations. Don't come into it thinking that you're about to hop into a live action episode of Chicago Fire. It's not like that. All of the cool firehouse dinners that you see where we're all sitting around the table, that happens. That's real. However, sometimes that dinner is hamburger helper. Which, by the way, is my favorite food. Absolutely slaps. It's fantastic.
I was about to say, if you have anything against Hamburger Helper, this episode will not air. You will not be included. No, sir.
I would expect nothing less. You don't disrespect the hamburger helper. We never talked about private EMS, by the way.
We're gonna get there.
Okay.
We're gonna get there.
I just have several bones to pick. But it's cool. It's fine.
Two more things. Second to last thing, if you could change it all, would you still take this path? Go into EMS, go into fire? Would you do something else?
As cliche and cheesy as it sounds, this is where I belong. Like, I truly feel that this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm doing what I was, cue my little superhero cape flapping in the wind moment, what I was born to do. So, and also, in reference to my earlier comment about how I one-upped my grandfather because I'm still alive, joke's on me because so is he. He is alive and well. He's kicking. See, I got you, didn't I?
Oh my god, dude, I thought your grandpa was dead. That's not funny.
One of them, yes, he is currently a resident of the Great Beyond. But that's neither here nor there. So, he noticed that I was catching up to him as far as career accomplishments go. So, what does his elderly retired self do? He goes and joins the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary Unit. Because he knows I'm not about to do that.
You can't top that in private EMS.
No, I mean, they've got goofy hats. and that's enough to keep me away.
All right. Last question. What is a recent or past call that has challenged you?
Hmm. Okay, so we'll go with my call from that I actually had day before yesterday. Had a patient with that was experiencing an Addisonian crisis. You know, the stuff that you read about in that chapter in paramedic school with words like myxedema or myxedema, however you say that word. Um, Something about the little hats that live on top of the kidneys not doing what they need to do. Adrenal glands are my favorite part of the human body for that reason alone, because they look like little hats sitting on top of a kidney. And it doesn't get any cuter than that for me. So, um, at the time, I did not know it was an Addisonian crisis. I thought she was just hypoglycemic because her blood sugar was like 3. So I hung a bag of D10, ran it through. She perked up a little bit, was a little more with it. And then she said, I have an autoimmune disease. So I said, oh, which one? And she said, all of them. This poor lady had so many autoimmune diseases. So this is one of those calls that I like because you got to put your thinking cap on. And, much like the little hats that live on top of the kidneys, I suspected they might be a culprit in this because she had the hypoglycemia, she had the hypotension. Her heart rate wasn't bradycardic. Her heart rate, she was actually tacking a little bit, like 115, 120. So, um, start running through my treatment plan, hang a bag of fluids, um, and I wanted to give her a corticosteroid, and we carry Solucortef. So, that's what we went with. Then got her to the hospital, and they took the ball from there and took off running with it. And that was probably one of my more interesting calls that I've had because afterwards, what I like to do if I have a call that I run and I don't fully understand the pathophysiology of what I was dealing with, I'm going to look it up.
Okay. And I have prepared. I asked my just questions. Adam, is there anything you want to talk about?
Boy, howdy, is there ever. We can talk about a couple of things. So, what are your thoughts? Because you've been in some of the same boats as I have. I've managed to escape the boat. However, it is a boat that is still very much trolling the waters, that is being driven by a bunch of pirates. They have hoisted the Jolly Roger and are wreaking absolute havoc on the poor general public. What are your thoughts on private EMS in a 911 capacity? I get it, people have to do the granny totes, they gotta run the dialysis calls. But those same people that are toting granny and going to the dialysis centers are running your 911 calls. What are your thoughts?
So, being currently employed by one, I'm going to tread very softly.
You tread softly. I'll come behind you and stomp some mud holes in it. It's okay.
So, you have your municipal who they're paid by the taxpayers, whatever. Um, then you have private EMS who is obviously privately owned, and there's insurance that plays into it. There's this, that, and the other. Um, I'm gonna go the route of saying that I'm very fortunate to work in a setting in a city in a environment right now where we are 911 contracted, which does happen even in private EMS. So our medics are primarily running like 98% of our runs are the 911 in the field running actual emergencies. I have worked in a setting where there would be like a week, 2 weeks where we didn't run a single 911 call. We would have them every now and then, but because of the city that I was in, um, there was the other agency that you worked for that was the contracted 911 agency. So they would get pretty much all the good stuff and actually run calls. And if they were out of town, we were up, but we were typically on a wait and return or dialysis run, something like that. So if you don't have medics who are actually good or are used to, or even EMTs as like first responders, if you don't have those that are like running, it's hard because they're not used to that environment. and they're not used to those types of calls, and they're used to just pick up me mom, pawpaw, bring him to the doctor appointment or dialysis. And honestly, it's a big push of why I became a paramedic because I was so sick and tired of running those, on top of like all the other reasons. But
If you look at it as a reason a lot of people go through to paramedic, because
yeah,
in a majority of places, especially down south, you're going to have private ambulance services. A lot of these more rural areas, you're going to have either a volunteer ambulance service, you're going to have a private ambulance service. Um, are y'all contractually held to a certain response time that has to be met?
yeah, it's the response time, and what we have right now is it has to be dual medics, and there's a lot of reasons why I'm not going to get into, but it has to be dual medic on the bigger, more heavy hitting 911 calls.
Right. So the thing that rustles my jimmies, that has sort of sparked this thing in me that has sent me on the warpath, is living it. Um, I had to call 911 for my mother, my dear, sweet mother, who I kind of like her a little bit. Had to call 911 for her. She was having chest pain. She's got an extensive cardiac history, had a quadruple bypass in like 2016, sometime around there. She was having chest pains. Luckily enough, it ended up being non cardiac. However, we waited 32 minutes for an ambulance to get her.
Are you serious?
Absolutely. And I happened to work for the ambulance service, who shall remain nameless.
Thank you for not naming the agency.
Of course, I would never do such a thing. Anywho, I talked to one of my friends who was in dispatch. They were sending a unit from another town. I can't even tell you what town because that would give away. Because they were the closest available unit. Because a lot of their units, their frontline, quote unquote, again, 911 units that are supposed to be used for 911 calls, were sent out of town on transfers, leaving them with very, very limited 911 coverage. So these people almost put my mom on a t-shirt because they wanted to take transfers. We had a big picture of my mom with little angel wings in the background saying, Cindy Fields, 1958 to 2022, with a picture of a little ambulance with one of those no smoking signs, circles of the line through it on top of it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And, I understand private EMS serves a purpose. They do. They're needed. There are people who cannot get to doctor's appointments. There are people who are bedbound that need dialysis, cancer treatments, all sorts of things. However, this certain company has monopolized EMS in this entire area. Nobody else can come in because they have contracts. But they consistently fail on the response times. I personally have responded to a call that we had a ridiculous response time to that was 2 counties away. 2 counties away. Because we were the closest available ambulance. And I don't think that's right. I think people deserve an ambulance when they need one. We've had several calls, wrecks, for example, where we have requested a helicopter to respond just based off of the information that we were getting, and the helicopters beat us there. They're already patient loaded and taken off before we even make it on scene. And it's a major thing of mine. If you are not able to serve in that 911 capacity, you need to kind of, unass a spot and let some people come in to help with that 911 system coverage.
No, 100%. And that's like, at the end of the day, aside from billing, aside from it's nice to have like those interfacilities that get you bills paid, get me a paycheck, that kind of thing.
Right.
At the end of the day, like, we're in this service literally to help people. That is why we're here. And if, like you're saying, and like I've been on the other end because the agency I worked at previously was not a fan of your agency and vice versa.
It's sort of like the Bloods and the Crips, but fancier.
No, quite literally. And the colors were different, but one of our colors were literally the Crips. and it was always hard of like we would just watch the other agency like running these calls and doing all this stuff, and we're just like it was nice because we're sitting at the station like, oh, big chilling, but also like because you guys had the contract, we had to sit, and it's kind of like this thing of me and my partners would always discuss like, I wonder how many people are calling right now but they're getting held because like we would get the rollovers, and it's like we would get to the patient and they're like, I called 20 minutes ago, and we're like, sorry, we just got the call 5 minutes ago, now we're here.
Because they want to try to sit there and hold on to it until the very last second, hoping one of their people clears up from somewhere before they roll it over to somebody. And me personally, if I have to call 911, say I'm watching my neighbor mow their yard and they get struck by lightning. Okay, that's really unfortunate. It's why you don't mow your yard in a thunderstorm. And also, they probably need an ambulance fairly quickly. Um, so of course, I'm gonna go help them. I'm gonna go pray for them, I guess. Maybe do a little bit of CPR. But I don't care what color your truck is. I don't care what it says on the side. As long as there's a paramedic that shows up to where I need them in a timely fashion, then I don't care if you're private, public. I don't care, if you're like on a foreign exchange program and I get an ambulance from Mexico City. That's fine. As long as they're there in a timely manner when it's really important that they drive fast. That's fine. But unfortunately, the reality of it is it's not that way. And I think if the general public knew that this is how it was operating, there would be some changes made. It's not fair to everybody that this is happening. It's not, they don't care if their granny has a stroke. They don't care if that transfer that's been holding for 28 minutes gets an ambulance to be sent out. They want you to come snatch up Meemaw and get that plug out of her brain so she can continue to exist. That's how it needs to be.
That's how it needs to be. But when you got um, higher ups at that agency and stuff who are just worried about how much money they're going to get, their revenue and whatnot, and that's what about your agency that you worked at. It's just hard. Like when they make all these big promises and we hear about them, or at the agency I worked at, we would hear about them and we're like, huh, that's interesting because that's not what we see. Like there was a dude, we transferred a guy from an ER that was like 10, 15 minutes from our station to one of the bigger hospitals in a certain city in Louisiana.
Just say New Orleans.
It was not New Orleans.
Well, nobody else knows where this city is that doesn't live there. Everything is either New Orleans or Lafayette. That's it.
So he was going from the little kind of, lower level hospital ER to the bigger hospital where he could get all the cardiac services and stuff. So we get there and we're like, hey man, good to see you. He says, oh, thank God y'all are here. I've been waiting 4 hours until finally that agency that was going to transfer him, because that's the one that the hospital always used, the agency was like, hey, we're on another call, so we're just going to go ahead and transfer you over to the other agency. And the guy looked at us and said, like you're saying, he's like, I don't care who brings me over, I'm just trying to get there.
Right.
And like at the end of the day, that's it. That's no, like you said, nobody cares what if somebody's having an actual medical emergency, because there are times when the caller requests a certain agency. If you're in one of those places, you understand they can do that, but 9 times out of 10, that caller, if it's an actual emergency, they don't care who shows up. They just need someone to show up.
Exactly. And it. I hate that this conversation is even being had because it should never exist in the first place. Mind you, I'm not saying private EMS should never exist. I'm saying that the problem of having to wait 30 minutes for an ambulance shouldn't have to exist. It's equivalent to the days pre-EMS where you need help and a hearse shows up in your driveway, throws you in the back while, look, I don't even know what people's names were back then. Well, Bartholomew and Jeffrey, with a G, both hop up front and drive you to either the hospital or the funeral home, depending on what like how you look. If you look dead, you're gonna wake up in a funeral home somewhere. Essentially, it's the same thing. You'd be just as good calling the funeral home as in a hearse to pick you up. And if you make a sound or something, they might actually just drive you to the hospital, and they would have a quicker response time than the ambulance sometimes. We have a big, big problem down here where, and it's the most ridiculous thing. You call 911, and I am not by any means knocking EMT basics. I was a basic for quite some time before I became a paramedic. They are an integral part of the EMS system, and they they serve a purpose. But if I'm calling 911 for a cardiac arrest, and two EMT basics hop out of the ambulance, you know, that's another problem. And they have a thing where they will send a double basic truck to a 911 call, and they will get out and they will make an assessment and they will start what treatments they can while an ALS unit is responding from God only knows where. Now, we have fly cars um, that are mostly staffed with paramedics. They have one fly car that is staffed with an EMT basic that I do not understand. I don't know why that's a thing. But there's been times where I have responded to a call with the fire department while I still also worked at this agency. And they sent me a double basic truck. And I ended up getting on the ambulance and rode that call into the hospital because I wasn't going to make a patient wait, another 25 minutes before a paramedic got there. I'm a paramedic. I'm here. Granted, I didn't have my narcotics because this agency doesn't keep their narcotics in a safe on the truck. They keep them in little fanny packs that the paramedics would wear on their belt. So I didn't have my narcs, but sure as God's got sandals, I had a bag of a certain color that, if I have to, I'll snow somebody with Benadryl. I ain't scared. Yeah, you're right. I gave them 750,000 milligrams of Benadryl, but but they're not hurting anymore. They're sleeping almost a little too peacefully. But hey, you know, I got them there, and you know they have lost sight of what public service is. They have a public Facebook page. They'll end up on the news every once in a while. They drove through a high school's theater club car wash and let them wash the ambulance. And oh, look what we're doing for the community. Meanwhile, the community relations guy that you sent in that ambulance to get it washed, like 2 blocks down the road, a bus full of hemophiliac Jehovah's Witnesses just crashed through a plate glass window factory, and your closest ambulance is 162 miles away. Like that's a problem. I don't care how good you look for cameras. Put your money where your mouth is, and fulfill these 911 contracts. They consistently fall below the expected response time. But what are you gonna do? There's no other ambulance services around this area. We're far enough away from Houston that none of the Houston ambulance services are gonna touch it. Well, if you go east, guess what? You end up in that little L-shaped state that looks like a boot that people call Louisiana. There's like two cities there. It's New Orleans and Lafayette. But, you go that way across the river and it's the same people. They're not going to do you any good because you're going to have more of them just doing the same thing. And it's sad, and I want there to be a change, and I'll do what I can, which realistically is not much, except talk about it on podcasts and make the occasional salty Facebook post. But, unfortunately, it is what it is. And as long as there's money to be made, and there is a private, for-profit ambulance service that is covering your territory where you live, then chances are, at some point or another, you're going to encounter this problem.
So, I mean, there are agencies that are trying to change that. Like, you have Alexandria, Louisiana, um, which is the agency I worked at. That's kind of where they were, and there was this huge thing of why don't we move in and do some 911 contracts because we're also here and like it was brought up, your response times are trash.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that it's because of the good old boys club that it didn't go through, but I'd be hard pressed to find another reason why they denied it.
Exactly. And if you're gonna be like that, if you were gonna, completely just lock down any opportunity for assistance, then maybe have some dedicated 911 trucks that don't get touched for transfers. You leave them alone unless they are needed for a 911 call. And the agency, I say agency, I won't even give them that dignity of calling them an agency. The company that I came from, they run mutual aid with New Orleans EMS. They send a whole bunch of ambulances over there with a whole bunch of people. Meanwhile, we're, 57 911 calls deep in the hole with 34 of them holding because New Orleans pays them money to go over there. Why can't you run mutual aid to yourself and have some more people to run these calls? I'm just saying, it doesn't make sense. I mean, it makes sense because that's how they're making money. But, they're making money at the expense of, you know, people's well being. And that's a shame.
Kind of in that mindset, I get it that the transfers are what make money. Like you really do lose money running 911 calls, whatever, because not everybody pays the ambulance bill. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's a coincidence that the color of the dollar is the color of that specific agency's uniform, and I'm just gonna leave it at that.
You sure right.
So,
The most ironic part is they have the little flag, the flag that's on the side of the ambulance.
yeah.
There's a life preserver, one of the little life rings that you throw out to people if they're drowning, that's on that flag. And that is the most ironic thing because, what they do is they see somebody, like they're driving somewhere, and they see somebody having that emergency. But you know what? There's a wait and return doctor's appointment that was scheduled 4 days ago. So they throw that little life preserver out with a little note attached that says "We'll be back?" question mark on there. And, just good luck, buddy. Have fun.
And I'm not going to go into that agency with a life preserver, how all of the employees and medics are drowning working there and getting burnt out.
Huh. Oh my lord. Yeah, and again, it's absolute clown shoes. Man, I don't know. It's rough. It is rough out there if you were somebody who gives a damn about people. Like, I mean, what are you gonna do? And it's sad because there are some very, very good paramedics and EMTs who could do amazing things, but they're tied here because they're the only option in this area. They're all you got. Now, I remember back in the day before they showed up, prior to 2006, there were 5 or 6 different ambulance services out here. And you know what? The 911 calls got ran because one of them, one service, they all worked together. And one of them, one or two of them, would be strictly on 911 rotation. And then the next week, they would switch. So everybody still got their transfers. However, the citizens still got their ambulance. It was the best of both worlds. And, certain people came in here and really screwed the pooch. And now it is just, it's so bad. So bad.
And granted, there are probably solutions. There are probably solutions to these issues. I don't work in management. I never plan to work in management because from what I've heard, it sucks the life out of you. There are probably solutions, but
Would result in a loss of profit.
also you got these people, yeah, a loss of profit, but you got these people in management who, in all honesty, have not ran a call in however long. I work in an agency and I love the agency that I'm at. This is not because somebody might listen and report me. Like legitimately 100% love the agency I'm at. And our supervisors and some of our management, they do actually run calls, and it makes the difference of when decisions are made and voices need to be heard. They're able to be like, hey, we shouldn't do that because in the field we have firsthand experience, you know? But I do want to point out I actually have been transported before by that agency. No, they were really nice.
Oh, at the field level, I mean, the paramedics and the EMTs themselves, you can't beat them. You know, this none of this is their fault, and I'm not by any means knocking most of them. Um, of course, you know, there's those few that, you know, you'll be like, can you please send me another ambulance? Like, please. But, you know, that's neither here nor there.
But it's everywhere.
You're right. You're right.
So, Adam, do you have any last remarks, last comments?
Uh, I mean, I could go on this topic for days. Spotify does not have enough room to store the file that I would unload upon them if uh if I had the opportunity to go on about this. Um, but you know, just as a whole, I'm not knocking all private ambulance services. You know, because like I said, they're a necessity. They are needed. They serve a purpose. Um, and I'm definitely not knocking my coworkers that I worked with at this company because I've made some lifelong friends there. But you know, if you're a member of the general public and you're not in fire, EMS, or law enforcement, pay attention to how things are ran in your area because you will be the start of the change that needs to happen. And also, don't be afraid to go get your colonoscopies. They too are needed. They serve a purpose, and they're not that bad.
Very eloquently said. All right, so that's all I have. Adam, that's all you have.
That's it.
All right, so with that. So, guys, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, future topic ideas, please email me at 22 at the lips podcast at gmail.com. Again, that's 22 at the lips podcast at gmail.com. Thanks. Never stop learning and be safe out there, friends.
And I'm telling you, if you have never had your back door kicked in by an elderly Syrian man with abnormally large fingers, you're missing out. And don't you just love how Hand-Tevi pretends that people don't ever turn 2, 4, 6, or 8?
That's irrelevant.
Right, yeah. It's like they can die. That's fine. They're not important.
Editing that out.
Okay. That's... I them 2-year-olds. I don't like them.
Who's a 2-year-old?
Tell Satan I said hi, you little like, oh my god. Terrible twos, my ass. They don't exist in my book. Oh my lord.
And that's the end.
Very good. Very good.